Welcome to our 5 on 5. I'm pleased to be joined by SOU President Rick Bailey. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Sparing you the handshake as I'm battling a cold.
Yes.
So obviously we're here talking about the realignment plan. I want to give our viewers some quick background. The Board of Trustees voted unanimously on Friday to approve it. A lot to unpack here. It saves SOU $3.6 million this year, while identifying another $9 million in recurring cost reductions. Around 82 jobs, or 13% of the university workforce, will be eliminated as part of this plan. Many of these positions will not be filled, but about 24 people will be laid off. Let's start there. Where are the staffing reductions taking place?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So let me start with the fact that this is a bittersweet moment, right? And to answer your question directly, there will be faculty who are impacted by this, classified staff who are impacted by this, and unclassified staff, and actually happening in relatively similar numbers, totaling to 82 positions. It's bittersweet in that this is the first step of something that we know is fixing the fiscal structural deficit that has haunted us for so many years. But we understand that that's come at a very sobering and serious cost, because these are livelihoods of people we really care about, some of whom have been in service to our students and our university for decades. So it's a bittersweet moment for us.
Isn't tuition going up this fall? And it usually does, to be fair, but can that not cover this gap?
No, unfortunately you can't. So what we did as we went through this work, we have a group called the Tuition Advisory Council, and it's made up of students, faculty, staff members, and we set the goal for us, especially knowing how difficult this work was going to be, that we can't, and the goal was we're not going to put more and more on the backs of students. We set the goal of SOU being the lowest tuition increase of any public university in the state. The jury's still out. But based on preliminary numbers, it looks like we're going to hit that target. So what the board approved also in the same meeting on Friday was a 2.9% tuition increase for the coming year, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be the lowest in the state. Okay.
How much does the state support SOU? And I know that number has changed, but do you have any numbers, 5, 10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I do. It's a delicate thing to talk about.
I understand these are your bosses.
Yes, so let me be... I'll be delicate with it and say, and this is serious, there is no villain in the story. So let me start with that. But we do have this phenomenon here in Oregon in that 20 years ago, the revenues for public universities in the state, 2/3 of them, on average, 2/3 were funded by the state, and 1/3 came from tuition. 20 years later, it's exactly flipped. So now, 1/3-ish of our revenues come from the state, and now 2/3 or more are on the backs of our students. So that's something that Oregon has just done over the last 20 to 30 years. We have to own that as a state. And so it's incumbent upon us as institutions, knowing that that is not likely to change anytime soon. We need to change the fiscal model so that we're not just going back to students to ask them to pay more for what they do.
Okay. Well, that leads me perfectly into the outside the box, if you will, ideas that you're doing. But I want to take a quick commercial break before we get there. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our 5 on 5. Again, we're here with Southern Oregon University President Dr. Rick Bailey, talking about the finances and the realignment plan of what your university's been going through. I believe it was last fall that Lithia made a pretty sizable donation, Lithia Motors, to the school. You guys are creating some pretty interesting things. How does that factor in or aid in the realignment and the fiscal changes necessary?
Yeah, it's a great question, Craig. So we're really excited about really taking advantage of philanthropy in a new way, and in some ways behaving a lot more like a much larger university. So the partnership with Lithia, and we are so incredibly grateful for that, as exciting as the records that we're breaking, what's even more exciting for me is the fact that that funding is being used in ways that actually bend the cost curve for the university. So, for example, we have funding that's part of that gift that will help pay for scholarships for students. That's always good, right? We always want to continue to do that. But part of that gift is also helping to support faculty and staff. It's actually paying for talent. So as we move forward thinking about philanthropy, it is how do we create endowed faculty positions, endowed chair positions, and other things that, no kidding now, bend the cost curve for the university long term, so that, again, that's less that we have to put on the backs of our students.
Okay, and then what about all these other new ideas that we talk a lot in the news about the layoffs and all these other things that are happening. But like housing, like this is this student housing, or this is other types of opportunities you guys are looking at that are probably just way outside the box for SOU?
For sure, outside the box. And I will say that it very soon will probably get a lot of attention. We're already getting national attention for some of the things that we're doing, which is great. The goal really is for SOU to move where we're not solely reliant on these two traditional sources of funding, right? Because it's always been state funding and tuition.
Sure.
And if we can bring in other sources, not necessarily as a panacea, but something that changes the model enough, well, then that's great. And so we need to explore that. A couple of ideas we're exploring. We have an aging residence hall called Cascade. It sits on about 5 acres of our campus. We've recently received funding from the state of Oregon to demolish it responsibly. And the question is, what goes up in its place? Well, with our demographics in the region, there is a need. We always talk about student housing. We always talk about attainable housing and affordable housing. But we also need to discuss senior housing. And there is a big demand for that as well. So we are actually looking at establishing a senior living facility where the residents would be fully embedded in the fabric of the university. That's really, really exciting. So we talk a good game about lifelong learning, and we host the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, and it's fantastic. Yeah. This is taking that model and really supercharging it for the institution, where the university becomes a revenue-sharing partner. Right. So again, this is a new now potential source of revenue.
Potentially ease pressure in all these other areas. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, thank you. I know how busy you've been with all this stuff. It's great to have you in studio to break it down for us. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Craig. Happy to be with you.
All right. Stay with us. We'll be right back.